The river speaks before the man does, before the ink dries on his page, before the laughter or the cynicism. There is the flow, endless, restless, reflective. Somewhere along the banks of the Mississippi, a boy watched the morning mist rise from the surface. And perhaps, in that silence, he learned something about truth, something about illusion, something about how the world loves to disguise both. That boy's name was Samuel Langhorne Clemens, but the world would later call him Mark Twain. The phrase itself, Mark Twain, came from the river, a term used by boatmen to measure the depth of water, 2 fathoms deep, safe to navigate. It was both a practical code and a metaphor. For Twain's life was precisely that, an eternal navigation through the depths of laughter and sorrow, through shallow comfort and the dangerous unknown. He once said, "The secret source of humor itself is not joy, but sorrow," and perhaps that is why he laughed so deeply, because he knew beneath every joke there was pain. Beneath every story there was the current of truth, unseen, unending. The river was his first teacher. It taught him how to see, how to watch men chasing illusions, how to listen to silence between 2 ripples. It showed him that everything moves, people, beliefs, nations, even truth itself. But in its movement, there's a strange kind of stillness, the same kind of stillness that hides behind laughter, the same kind of stillness that lives in irony. As a young man, Twain worked as a riverboat pilot, steering through fog, currents, and unseen rocks. He learned to read the water, not by what it showed, but by what it hid. And that became his way of reading humanity. Man is the only animal that blushes, or needs to. His humor was a mirror, gentle enough to make people laugh, but sharp enough to make them bleed. Every bend of the Mississippi was a lesson in human nature. Every shadow on the water, a reflection of hypocrisy. And when the Civil War broke out, the river changed its color from silver to red. Twain left the pilot house behind, carrying only his wit and his pen. The current would now flow through his sentences. He began to write of boys and rivers, of mischief and morality, of slavery and freedom, not as grand sermons, but as simple adventures. And yet, beneath every joke about Tom and Huck, there was a thunderous critique, a whisper of conscience, a mirror of America. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, published in 1884, was not merely a story of 2 boys drifting down the river. It was an allegory of freedom and sin, of civilization and hypocrisy. The raft became a symbol, a floating refuge from society's corruption, and Huck's friendship with the escaped slave Jim, a quiet rebellion against the moral blindness of the world. Twain was not a preacher. He was a truth-teller in disguise. He wrapped his philosophy in laughter, his despair in irony, his rage in jokes. He understood what few ever dared to say, that humor can be sharper than hate and gentler than truth itself. Against the assault of laughter, nothing can stand. He used laughter not as escape, but as resistance, not as entertainment, but as enlightenment. And yet, he was not untouched by melancholy. The more he saw, the more he realized that man is both the clown and the tragedy of the universe. He wrote once, almost whispering to eternity, "The human race has only one really effective weapon, and that is laughter." But behind that sentence lies another truth he never quite said aloud, that laughter was also his shield against despair. When Twain looked at the world, he saw a circus, a parade of self-righteous men marching under banners of morality and faith, while stepping on the backs of the powerless. He laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was intolerably human. There was always a double tone in his writing, the boy who marvels at the river and the man who mourns what lies beneath it. His Mississippi was no longer just a river. It was a metaphor for conscience, for time, for the unending current of human folly. If you listen carefully, you can still hear it today, flowing through every modern lie, every righteous speech, every tweet of self-importance. The river has not stopped speaking, and perhaps Twain's voice is still there, laughing softly at us, somewhere between the ripples. He had a peculiar relationship with God. To him, the divine was as ironic as the human. He once wrote, "If there is a God, he is a malign thug." Was it blasphemy or simply brutal honesty? Twain didn't hate God. He hated the lies spoken in his name. He hated the moral preachers who loved sin more than salvation. He hated how the world used faith as camouflage. But deep within his sarcasm, there was still yearning, a kind of tired tenderness for the idea of goodness. He wasn't trying to destroy faith. He was trying to purify it by laughter, by doubt, by truth. He believed that honesty was the last form of faith left in man. The Mississippi never really leaves a man. Even when Twain grew old, when fame became a burden and laughter a ghost, he would still hear it at night, the river calling. It was his first and last sermon. It told him what no religion ever could, that truth is water. It cannot be held, only followed. That morality is a boat. It floats, it leaks, it drifts. And that wisdom is knowing when to stop rowing. Twain once said, "Truth is stranger than fiction, but it is because fiction is obliged to stick to possibilities. Truth isn't." That sentence, like the river itself, flows endlessly, mocking, mirroring, cleansing. The river speaks, the man listens, and so begins his eternal dialogue with the world, between laughter and sorrow, between illusion and insight, between man and himself. This is not just the story of Mark Twain. It is the story of every soul who dares to laugh at their own darkness, who dares to see the mirror of humanity and not look away. The river continues, as does the search for truth. The Mississippi River will always have its own way. No engineering skill can persuade it to do otherwise. Mark Twain, Life on the Mississippi, 1883. Before there was the humorist, before the cynic, before the philosopher cloaked in laughter, there was a barefoot boy chasing dragonflies by the Mississippi. Samuel Langhorne Clemens was born in 1835 in a small trembling town called Florida. Missouri, a name that carried warmth it never truly possessed. He was born prematurely, in a house so small the stars felt closer than the ceiling. His father, John Clemens, was a stern man, proud, principled, and perpetually unlucky. His mother, Jane, had what her son would later call a gentle madness of kindness. They were not poor in dreams, but poverty had already signed its name on their door. When Sam was 4, the family moved to Hannibal, a little port town along the Mississippi, a place that would become the eternal landscape of his imagination. Hannibal was a paradox wrapped in sunshine. It looked innocent. Boys swimming, girls giggling, steamboats passing in gold light. But beneath that charm lay the beating heart of slavery, ignorance, and silent cruelty. Twain would later recall it with both affection and anguish. In those days, it was a paradise whose gates were guarded by ignorance. The boy did not know he was witnessing history. He was too busy living it, in dust, in mischief, in laughter. He fished in the same waters where enslaved men washed their wounds. He played in the same fields where injustice whispered in the wind. And though he did not yet understand it, those sights carved deep, invisible rivers inside him. They would one day flow through his words, quietly, bitterly, beautifully. He found wonder in the ordinary. A frog could become a philosopher, a fence could become a battlefield, a lie could become an art form. When I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant I could hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to be 21, I was astonished at how much he had learned in 7 years. Even as a child, Twain's humor wasn't meant to mock others. It was a gentle rebellion against self-importance. He saw how adults wrapped hypocrisy in words like virtue, He saw how churches preached forgiveness while owning slaves in the back pew. He once said, "I was educated enough to know that I could not be educated." And that was the essence of his boyhood wisdom. He trusted the river more than the preacher, the stars more than the schoolmaster. He believed that truth came not from authority, but from observation, from seeing how people behaved when they thought no one was watching. The Mississippi was not merely scenery. It was a living god of his youth. It roared, whispered, mocked, forgave. It carried cotton and corpses, songs and sorrows, dreams and debris. It was both playground and teacher, confessor and accomplice. The river had a voice. It could murmur like sleep, and it could thunder like judgment. The boy would sit by its edge for hours, throwing stones, watching the circles spread wider, as if time itself were rippling outward from his small hands. He began to understand something wordless, that everything he touched, everything he laughed at, was temporary, that the town, the river, the world were all stories in motion, and one day he would write them down before they vanished into the current. Hannibal also taught him about death, a shadow that came early and never quite left. His father died when Sam was just 11. He watched the coffin lowered into the earth, and something in the boy's laughter cracked forever. That night, he went to the riverbank again. He said later, not to anyone, but perhaps to himself, "When I looked at him lying there, it seemed a pity that he was not a river, for the river goes on." From that moment, he began to write stories in his head, not to escape death, but to bargain with it. If life could be told as a story, then maybe it could be forgiven. And so, the boy who had nothing began to collect the world. Every sound, every lie, every glimmer of human absurdity. He stored them in his laughter. The people of Hannibal became sketches in his future novels. The talkative aunt, the cruel judge, the drunkard preacher, the cunning boy who'd trade a Bible for a frog. They didn't know they were characters yet, but Twain was already writing them in silence. The human race has one really effective weapon, and that is laughter. He saw it all, how laughter made the unbearable tolerable, how imagination turned pain into art, how childhood became the raw material of philosophy. He would later say, "When you fish for love, bait with your heart, not your brain." That was Hannibal too, a place where hearts learned before minds caught up. It was innocence surrounded by corruption, faith surrounded by irony, light surrounded by shadow. And somehow, in that strange mixture, Mark Twain was born. He left Hannibal at 17. The town receded like a dream behind him, fading into the mist, its laughter still clinging to his memory. He carried only a notebook and a restlessness that would never truly leave. He had no money, but he had the river's language. He had the eyes of an observer. He had the ears of a philosopher who hadn't yet spoken. In years to come, he would write The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, 1876, a nostalgic reconstruction of that childhood painted with sunlight and shadow, innocence and irony, and yet beneath the cheerful mischief of boys, he whispered something that only adults could hear, that innocence itself is a kind of rebellion, that to be free, one must first forget the rules of civilization. He said it gently, through Tom's laughter and Huck's raft, but the message was unmistakable. It is better to be out of the world's hypocrisy than to drown in it politely. And so, the boy who watched the river became the man who wrote about it. Every ripple he saw as a child became a sentence. Every glimmer of sunlight on the water became a memory of truth. He had learned the simplest, hardest lesson of all, that the world will always be absurd, and that laughter is the only bridge between its cruelty and its beauty. The Mississippi was his mirror, and childhood was the first reflection. When I was young, I could remember anything, whether it happened or not. Mark Twain. When Samuel Clemens left Hannibal, He did not just leave home, he left certainty behind. He was 17, restless, and already half in love with the idea of elsewhere. He boarded steamboats, worked as an apprentice printer, and wandered from town to town as if chasing some invisible compass. He had no plan, only a hunger to see, to learn, to mock, to understand. That hunger would later become the engine of his wit. Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. But in those days, it was not wisdom he sought, it was escape. He became a riverboat pilot on the Mississippi, the very river that had raised him. It was 1857, and piloting was one of the most respected, most dangerous professions in America. Every sandbar, every current, every hidden snag could mean death or fortune, and yet, Twain said later that those years were the happiest of his life. He learned precision, the art of reading nature without arrogance. He learned that survival depended on attention, the same attention a writer would need to read the soul of humanity. He said, "The face of the river, in time, became a book." And perhaps that is where his awakening began. In silence, in the rhythm of the water, in the dialogue between chaos and control. But fate, as it often does, had its own narrative to write. When war came in 1861, the river became a battlefield. Trade stopped, pilots were out of work. The river turned red. Twain briefly joined a Confederate militia, a decision that would haunt him with guilt and irony. He deserted after only 2 weeks. Not out of cowardice, but out of clarity. "I was not made for killing my own kind," he wrote later. With quiet defiance, it was his first conscious act of moral rebellion. He fled west, to Nevada, to California, following rumors of silver and reinvention. And there, amid dust and gambling halls, Samuel Clemens died. Mark Twain was born. The name Mark Twain came from the river, a call that meant safe water, 2 fathoms deep. It was an inside joke and a declaration of survival. From then on, his life became a dialogue between 2 depths, the worldly and the moral, the comic and the tragic, the shallow and the profound. He began to write for newspapers, turning everyday absurdities into stories. He observed gamblers, miners, priests, and poets, all pretending not to be lost. His words became mirrors, and people laughed, without realizing they were laughing at themselves. Man is the only animal that blushes, or needs to. His satire did not come from cruelty, but from recognition. He understood how pride, hypocrisy, and fear disguised themselves as morality. He understood that to be human was to lie beautifully, and sometimes mercifully. But behind the laughter, a shadow grew. The deeper he saw into others, the lonelier he became. He began to question everything: faith, politics, civilization, even progress itself. If Christ were here now, there is one thing he would not be: a Christian. That was Twain at his sharpest, not irreverent, but heartbreakingly honest. In 1866, he traveled to Hawaii as a correspondent. He saw volcanoes breathe fire and oceans swallow light. Nature mocked the arrogance of man, he wrote. The creator made Italy from designs by Michelangelo, but the Sandwich Islands he made out of scraps left over. He laughed. But within that laughter was awe, and a trembling understanding that man is both magnificent and ridiculous. His humor became a philosophy. He once called it the armor of the disappointed. He wore that armor well. In 1869, he published The Innocents Abroad. It became a success overnight, a book that mocked the arrogance of American travelers who sought holiness while behaving like fools. It was satire with heart, a mirror so clean that readers saw both beauty and shame. Travel is fatal to prejudice, he repeated, and the world began to listen. He followed with Roughing It, 1872, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, 1876, and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, 1884. Each book was a reflection of the human spirit, its innocence, its corruption, its longing for freedom. In Huckleberry Finn, Twain wrote one of the boldest moral awakenings in literature. When Huck, faced with the choice to betray his friend Jim or go to hell, chose hell, Twain was declaring that conscience is greater than convention. All right then, I'll go to hell. That line was not just a rebellion, it was redemption. The voice of a child awakening to truth in a world that had taught him to lie. It was, perhaps, the moment when Mark Twain himself began to wake. But awakening has a cost. The man who made the world laugh was beginning to drown in silence. His success brought fame, then wealth, then ruin. He lost fortunes to failed investments, trusting machines and businessmen with the same innocence he mocked in others. He said, "The lack of money is the root of all evil." In his later years, his wife Olivia and his beloved daughter Susie died. Each loss pulled him closer to the very darkness he had once kept at bay with humor. He began to write not just about others, but about the absurdity of existence itself. Life does not consist mainly, or even largely, of facts and happenings. It consists mainly of the storm of thoughts that are forever blowing through one's mind. He saw death everywhere, but instead of despair, he found strange serenity in it. He began to understand that the river that began his life was still flowing, towards something infinite, unknowable, peaceful. In one of his last writings, he mused, "The fear of death follows from the fear of life. A man who lives fully is prepared to die at any time." That was not cynicism. That was liberation. He had lived. He had laughed. He had suffered. And through it all he had seen. And so, the boy from Hannibal, the pilot of the Mississippi, the satirist of the human soul, became what he had always been, a witness to the comedy of existence, to the tragedy of understanding, to the river that never stops. When he died in 1910, Halley's Comet passed overhead, the same comet that had appeared at his birth. He once predicted, "I came in with Halley's Comet in 1835. It is coming again next year, and I expect to go out with it." And so he did. The river had claimed its storyteller. His laughter remains, not as noise, but as illumination. He taught us that humor is not escape, it is courage. That laughter is not denial, it is understanding, and that truth, though bitter, can still be sung. Kindness is the language which the deaf can hear and the blind can see. By the time the century turned, Mark Twain had become a monument. His face, the wild hair, the white suit, the sharp eyes, had become a symbol of the American conscience. He stood on lecture stages, his voice both thunder and laughter. People came to hear jokes, but they left haunted, as if they had been told the truth in disguise. He was no longer merely a humorist. He was a philosopher with a grin, a preacher without a church, a saint with no God. Against the assault of laughter nothing can stand. That was his gospel. That laughter was not denial, but revelation. But every revelation costs something, and every satirist eventually runs out of others to expose. Then he turns the mirror upon himself. Twain did, and what he saw, he did not always forgive. He began to write in solitude, pouring his thoughts into notebooks that would not be published until long after his death. Those journals were not for the public. They were for eternity, and for God, if he existed at all. Man is a marvelous curiosity. He thinks he is the Creator's pet, yet he is the only creature that loves his neighbor as himself, and cuts his throat if his theology differs. That was Twain's gospel of irony. Beneath it, though, lay heartbreak. He had lost faith, not just in religion, but in the illusion of progress. The same world that had invented the telegraph and the steamboat had also invented slavery, imperialism, and war. He saw civilization rising, but not humanity. Man is the only animal that deals in that atrocity of atrocities, war. He is the only one that gathers his brother and joyfully slaughters him. It was no longer just satire, it was prophecy. In 1905, he wrote What is Man? A dialogue between an old man and a young man, a philosophical duel about free will and morality. The old man, of course, was Twain himself, tired, cynical, seeking truth without illusions. "Man is a machine," he wrote. "All his thoughts, all his acts are the result of external influences. He originates nothing." It was the voice of someone who had peered too long into the mechanism of the soul. But within that despair was still a kind of mercy, a tragic empathy for human blindness. He mocked, not because he hated, but because he understood. To understand humanity too deeply is to suffer a loneliness that language can barely hold. Twain had reached that place, a height where laughter turns to silence, and silence to understanding. He began to travel the world again, this time not as a celebrity, but as a weary observer. He went to India, to South Africa, to Europe. Everywhere he went, he saw empires crumbling and men building new idols from their ruins. He watched the British boast of civilizing Africa while children starved in their colonies. He watched American politicians preach liberty while lynching continued in the South. He could no longer laugh without tasting ash. "There are many humorous things in the world," he said. Among them, the white man's notion that he is less savage than the other savages. He had once believed in progress. Now, he believed in repetition, the tragic loop of human folly. The river flowed in circles, and yet even in that bitterness, there was beauty. For Mark Twain never stopped seeking the sacred. He simply stopped believing it wore robes. He found holiness in compassion, in absurdity, in the quiet dignity of the individual heart. He said, "Kindness is the language which the deaf can hear and the blind can see." That line was no longer a joke, it was confession. Twain had seen too much hypocrisy in organized faith to kneel before any church, but he still knelt before goodness. He began to write of angels, of dreams, of children, but always with the bittersweet tone of a man who knows paradise is fleeting. In Letters from the Earth, a book published posthumously, he imagined Satan writing home from Earth, mocking the absurdity of mankind. "Man is a reasoning animal," such is the claim. "I think it is open to dispute." It was savage, funny, and frighteningly accurate. But even Satan, in Twain's hands, was not evil. He was the truth-teller, the observer too honest to fit into heaven. Sound familiar? By now, Twain's laughter had slowed. His friends were gone. His wife Olivia had died in 1904. His daughters Susie and Jean followed. He lived alone in a big house in Reading, Connecticut, Stormfield, writing by lamplight, a solitary monk in the Church of Irony. He wrote less for applause and more for peace. He often sat by the window and watched the light fade across the hills. Neighbors would see him in his white suit, rocking gently in his chair, as if still listening to some invisible audience. Perhaps the ghosts of his laughter, perhaps the echo of the river. His tone shifted again, from mockery to surrender. "We are but a speck in the dust of ages," he wrote, "and yet to ourselves we are the universe." He no longer fought meaning, he simply observed its beauty in passing. His humor had become meditation, his rebellion, acceptance. He once wrote of death, not as ending, but as relief. "I do not fear death. I had been dead for billions of years before I was born, and had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it." That was his enlightenment. Not faith, but fearlessness, a peace beyond belief. And so the mirror turned once more. Mark Twain looked into it and saw the entire human story. Its laughter, its cruelty, its beauty, its futility, its endless, imperfect search for meaning. He realized that satire and scripture were twins, both born from the same ache for truth. He wrote, "God put the rainbow in the clouds not for the sunshine, but for the rain." That was Twain, the holy fool who laughed at everything and still believed in mercy. On April 21st, 1910, Halley's comet returned. Twain looked to the sky one last time and whispered, "I came in with it. I'll go out with it." That night, as the comet burned silently across the heavens, he did. The river closed its circle, the mirror turned dark, and in that darkness there was reflection, pure, silent, endless. Let us endeavor so to live that when we come to die, even the undertaker will be sorry. There is a stillness that comes when the voice has said everything it could, when the laughter fades, but its echo still trembles in the air. That is where Mark Twain now stands, not on a stage, but between the stars. He had lived through love and loss, faith and doubt, light and shadow. He had watched humanity build towers of reason and then burn them down with fear. And yet, he never stopped watching, never stopped wondering, never stopped laughing. To the end, his eyes remained awake, the eyes of a child, the eyes of a philosopher, the eyes of a man who saw through the veil and still found beauty behind it. The human race has one really effective weapon, he wrote, and that is laughter. It was never just a joke, it was a form of prayer, because to laugh in the face of absurdity is to say to the universe, "I still see you. I still care." Twain's humor was not escape, it was endurance. In his final writings, fragments, letters, unpolished thoughts, you can feel a man learning how to die without bitterness. He no longer fought the absurd. He embraced it. He had learned, after all his wars with truth, that meaning was not something to be conquered, but something to be witnessed. In one note, he wrote simply, "A man's character may be learned from the adjectives which he habitually uses in conversation, a gentle reminder that words reveal the soul," and his, even when sharpened by irony, still carried warmth. People think Twain was a cynic. He wasn't. He was a disappointed idealist, someone who had loved humanity too deeply to forgive its illusions. And yet, he forgave it anyway. His laughter became a mercy, a way to lift the unbearable weight of knowing. He saw every contradiction, every cruelty, every cosmic joke of existence, and still said, "It's all right. We're only human." He had become, in the end, something close to a monk of mirth, a mystic in disguise. His white suit, once theatrical, now looked almost ceremonial, the garment of a man who had made peace with impermanence. He often spoke of the Mississippi River, his first muse, his first teacher. He said it had taught him everything, the flow of time, the illusion of control, the way everything moves and returns. "The river has taught me that life does not stand still," he once said quietly to a friend. "It goes on, and it takes you with it, whether you like it or not." And perhaps that was his final sermon. When Halley's comet came back, he smiled and said, "I came in with it and I'll go out with it." It wasn't arrogance, it was poetry. A cosmic wink, a final joke to the universe that had been his stage. That night, the sky was alive with quiet fire. The comet burned silently, a long, white streak across eternity, and somewhere beneath it, a man closed his eyes and became light. He had entered legend, but more than that, he had entered understanding. In every word he left behind, you can still hear him whispering, "Don't take life too seriously. You'll never get out of it alive." It sounds like a joke, but it's not. It's a reminder that truth is unbearable unless you love it enough to laugh at it. He understood that irony is not the opposite of faith. It's its twin. Both require belief in something unseen. Both demand courage. Twain's gospel was simple. Laugh, not because life is meaningless, but because it's miraculous. His laughter was not cruelty. It was compassion in disguise, a medicine for those who could no longer pray. "Whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority," he once said, "it is time to pause and reflect. That is not rebellion, it's awakening." He wasn't mocking humanity. He was freeing it. As the camera fades over the Mississippi, the light ripples golden over the water. A single voice remains, gentle, amused, eternal. Kindness is the language which the deaf can hear and the blind can see, and so the laughter continues, not as noise, but as memory, as mercy, as light. The voice of Mark Twain still echoes, not in comedy clubs, but in every heart that dares to question and still chooses to care. The secret source of humor, he wrote, is not joy but sorrow. There is no humor in heaven, because heaven, Twain knew, was not a place. It was a moment when the soul learns to laugh again.